This week, we're going into the weird and wonderful. So, come with me. We'll see just what's weird and how to paint it. Here we are, guys. This is what's weird, but it's also wonderful. This is the Shaman sculpt from Fellgor Ravagers Kill Team that was released alongside the squats last year. I've actually built it up because I want to use it for Necromunda. So first things first, we've got our Chaos Black spray. And what we're going to do, we're going to mix up 2 parts of Rhinox hide to 1 part of Abaddon Black. We want a really super subtle brown for this. It's just to allow our washes something to catch to, but give the model a bit of depth at the same time. So go ahead, mix those paints up, chuck a bit of water in there as well, just to thin it down nicely. Give this model an all over coat of this. We're just going to put it everywhere. It's going to become our new base coat for all of our colours moving forward. So we'll do that now. We'll finish this off. We'll come back with the next step. So we've left our foundation coat plenty of time to dry now. We're going to go over it and start picking out the skin areas. And for this, we're going to be using Rakath flesh. I know it sounds unusual for, say, a Beastman flesh or something along those lines, but I really want to give this model an aged senior appearance, and this is the perfect foundation for that sort of aged, weathered, older looking skin. So let's go ahead, we'll pick out all the skin areas now, give them 2 good coats, nice and flowy, thin your paints out, 2 coats on there at least. If you need to give it a third, go ahead and give it a third, but we want this nice and even for our next step. So with that now done, we're going to move on and start painting the hilt of our staff. So grab out some Mournfang Brown, and we're going to give this 2 good even coats of Mournfang Brown. So while we're at it, we'll grab some Lead Belcher, and we're going to actually start blocking in all of our metal on this model. So that goes from the sort of belly plate around the middle, the top of the staff, there's some bits of chain. Look around on your model. Maybe you're painting one of the different Ravagers and some of them have a little bit of chainmail, weapon heads, guns, that sort of stuff. Just block all that in now. So now that we've started blocking it in, you can already see this model is starting to take shape, and it's giving that really eerie witchcraft shaman feel about it. But what I want to do, I want to actually start breaking this up a little bit more. Now these are all colours that are going to share the same wash. So let's grab some Balthazar Gold and we'll just pick some areas out just to help break it up, especially around that belly plate is a good spot because there's a lot of silver there. We just want to break it up and create a little bit of interest to draw the eye to the lower parts of the models. In keeping with our earthy tones, I want to grab some Steel Legion Drab now, and we're going to do that on the wrapping around the haft of the staff. So just grab that, couple of good coats on there, make it nice and even because we are going to wash this soon. So with that now done, we've grabbed a very similar colour in Xandri Dust. And what we've done, we've blocked in the rope, or cordage, which is hanging off the haft of the staff. But we're also going to block in the skull that makes up part of the staff as well. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can move on to the very next step. So I've actually gone ahead and mixed up 4 parts of Abaddon Black to 1 part Mechanicus Standard Grey here. We're going to block in this shoulder pad as well as any other sort of Imperial Guard looking armour that's on the model. This goes back to my painting black video where I don't like to paint pure black. I like to give it a little bit of a lift so that we've got something to wash into later on. If you want to know more about that, I'll leave the link in the description below. That's right, it's time for everyone's favourite bulletproof paint. It's Agrax Earthshade. We're going to mix this up. I've done it as 4 parts Agrax Earthshade to 1 part water. That way it just makes the wash flow really, really nicely, and it helps prevent too much of the wash settling in one area. Not so much the pooling, it's more when you sit on the flats. It just helps make it flow a little bit better and target those recesses more. So go ahead, we're giving this an all over wash of that mix now, and then we'll come back once it's dry. It'll take a good 20 minutes or so. So if you've got some other models that you can go on with in the meantime, grab them, pull them across. If not, put it down, go, grab yourself a drink, grab a snack, come back when it's done. So now we're going to start creating a bit of contrast on this model. We've got very similar colours. We're going to give it a bit of a pop now. So we'll grab some Deathworld Forest, and we're going to do that to all the cloth areas. So that'd be like the hood that goes over the head, the loincloth, the cloth at the back, anywhere that's fabric on your model. Grab that Deathworld Forest and chuck it on there now. This is a very thin paint, so you definitely need 2, but to be sure, you might need 3 coats of this. So we've got a really cool look coming along there, but now we're going to give it some depth. So we'll grab some Athonian Camo Shade, and we're going to do the same sort of thing. We're going to mix this up, 4 parts wash to 1 part water, and we're going to put that all over our fabric. Again, it's going to take about 20 minutes to dry. So if you can move on to another area or carefully paint around it while it's drying, then go for it. If not, go grab yourself a drink again, have a snack, and come back once it's done. So now we're going to grab our model, we'll grab a small old dry brush, and we're going to set up some Skaven Blight Dinge. So what I've done here, I've done 2 parts Skaven Blight Dinge to 1 part water, and then I've set my dry brush up ready to go onto the model. Start dry brushing across that fur section. Try and go across the grain so that you pick it up without pushing it into the depth of the model. I've grabbed another brush and set up some Storm Vermin fur on my palette. I haven't washed my dry brush out at all here. I've just grabbed the Storm Vermin fur, worked it in the bristles, and we're going to go a little bit lighter and do exactly the same thing here, working across the grain. We've done the same thing as with our Storm Vermin fur, but this time we've grabbed some Ulthuan Grey, and we've used that just to really show the age of this character that we're painting. I want mine to resemble sort of an older figure that's probably well past its prime. So just go super light with this. We only want to pick out the highest details here and really emphasize around that beard area and just a touch on the upper portions of the legs. So we're going to start working on our skin areas here. And what I've done, I've actually grabbed some Rakarth flesh to sort of relayer / highlight our skin at the same time. All we're doing here, we're rebuilding up that base coat. We're leaving our washed area in the recesses, trying to leave a little bit of area either side of that wash, and just filling in the panels using the Rakarth flesh brightest in the middle of our flesh panels, our muscle panels. So here I've got a mix of 50-50 Rakarth flesh and Flayed One flesh, and we're going to use this as our first layer of our highlight, just to start lining around sort of the bulkier areas of muscle. We don't want the contrast to be too strong from that Rakarth flesh. That's why we've mixed the two together and created our own sort of in-between layer here. It's really simple and really effective. It's really subtle, but it really gives it a natural look. So go ahead and mix those colours up and just start highlighting this out now. So with that now done, we're going to come in and sort of give this a final highlight and pick the highest points of our skin with some Flayed One flesh. Now, I haven't overly watered this one down. I want to have a fair bit of control, so I've added just a little bit less water than normal. I haven't gone the full 50-50. I've gone maybe a 60-40 paint to water ratio. but it allows me just that little bit extra control. Now, as you can see, I'm also taking a little bit of paint off my brush on my thumbnail before I go to the model. This just allows me to control the actual tone a little bit better and apply a bit less paint and have it not quite as stark, and it gives it just a little bit more of a natural blend there. So we're going to come in now and actually relayer our skull with Xandri dust again and build up the tones to create a better skull look. We're going to leave our Agrax Earthshade wash in the eye socket, the nose socket, and in the big open area at the bottom of the back of the head, as well as around that center spike that sort of protrudes through the top of the skull. It really is going to create a better finish doing it this way than skipping that Agrax Earthshade step, or by leaving it as Agrax Earthshade. So we'll do that now, and then we can move on to the next step. So as you can see, this model's really starting to come along now. And what we're going to do, we're going to start focusing a bit on the leather belts, leather pouches, the straps on the back of the ankle and the knee pads, things like that. So grab some Doomball Brown and we're going to give that 2 good coats. So now that we've started that leather, I'm going to come in with some Nuln Oil and we're going to mix that up, same as usual, about 4 parts to 1 wash to water. And we're going to go over all those belts and leather pouches and that sort of stuff to really drag them back down and make them look a little bit more natural rather than looking so bright and red. So this model's already starting to look super detailed, but let's jump back and focus on our skull again for a minute while we're doing our washes. Grab some Seraphim Sepia and we're going to mix that up, sort of 2 brush loads with half a brush load of water. Like I said, I just like adding that water to my washes just to make them flow a little bit better. So what I've done here, I've grabbed some Karak stone and we're going to start highlighting the wrapping around the handle of, or the haft of our staff. So we'll mix this up with water as usual, about 50-50, and just carefully go around and pick out the edges of the wrap that's on the haft of the staff. So what we're doing now, we're sort of doing a bit of a double duty here. We've grabbed some Ushabti bone and we're going to start from the top down. We're going to highlight the very first highlight on our skull. We're going to use this as well to do our cordage or rope that's hanging off sort of halfway down the staff. But then we're also going to use this as our final highlight for our wrapping around the haft. So this is sort of a handy way to do it, where we can now use the same paint to do a couple of things at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and grab some Wazdaka red and start highlighting our belts and pouches now. So this is an all over highlight, so tops and bottoms of the belts, all the way around the pouches, etc, etc. In order to finish off our leather belts, we're going to grab some Squig Orange and just give this a bit more of a directional highlight. So across the tops of the belt, the top facing areas of the pouches, maybe just some little tabs that are on there as well, like some lift tabs, things like that. So I'm going to change tact a little bit here, and what we're going to do, we're going to grab Mechanica Standard Grey and we're going to highlight around the edges of that guardsman shoulder pad that he's wearing there. Now look, it's a little bit bright, so what I did, I didn't want it as bright around those sort of worn dimpled bits on the shoulder pad. I've actually grabbed a bit of a Baden Black and mixed that in with the Mechanica Standard Grey to create sort of a half strength highlight, just to go over those less subtle divots and shapes that are on the shoulder pad. And then I've reserved the Mechanica Standard Grey itself for around the edges and those really sharp points, just to create the illusion of that being a specific, maybe non-reflective surface or something like that. So we've been bouncing around a bit, but we've gotten a fair bit of this model done. There's still another couple of big areas that are really throwing in the face that they're not finished. And the first of these is the metal. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab some Ironbreaker here, and we're going to start going over all that silver color and giving it sort of an all over highlight just to pick the edges of that back up. I really want the top edges of this metal to glisten. And what I'm doing here, I'm grabbing some Runefang steel, and we're going to highlight this, but we're going to focus on those sort of top facing surfaces. The other thing we're going to do here is go around. There's a few little studs and a couple of spikes and that poking out of other armor plates. We're going to go around with this color and just give them a bit of a touch so that it really pulls them out and draws out that those details are there against whatever background they're on. Now this next part, I don't want it to be too bright and overpowering, so we're just going to take it up one step rather than our usual two. So let's grab some Gehenna's Gold and let's highlight all of our Balthazar Gold base coat. So there's still a part of this model that's blisteringly obvious that it hasn't been highlighted yet. And that is our green fabric. So grab some Elysian green. And what we're going to do, we're going to start highlighting the tunic, the hood, the sort of capey bit around the back of the neck, all that sort of stuff now. With fabric, you just have to remember, sometimes less is more. So let's give it a final highlight here and let's grab some Ogren camo. Now with this, we just want to really pick the super sharp creases and folds. We don't want to do it everywhere. We aren't painting armor, we're painting fabric. It's going to be very subdued with its highlights. Being 40k models, these models have grenades and pistol pouches on them. So we'll grab some Castellan Green now and base coat our grenades. If you're doing Age of Sigmar or the old world here, you could just skip this step. That's okay. They don't exist in the fantasy world. What we're going to do now, we're going to grab some Corn Red and actually start base coating our tassels on the top of our staff. So this is actually a really important part here for one of our effects. And what we're going to do, we're going to grab some white scar and we're just going to dot it into the eyeballs of the model. Now these are tiny, so take the finest brush you've got with the best tip you've got, and we literally want to put a dot in there. So what I've done here, I've grabbed just a sort of half brush load of Bugman's Glow and I've chucked it in my wash tray and I've mixed it up with about 3.5 to 4 brush loads of water. And all we're going to do here, we're going to pick out the scars that are on this model. We're going to treat this like a wash and go over the scar and let it roll around the edges just to create that sort of inflamed look, that scarred look. While I have my wash palette out, I've grabbed some Agrax Earthshade and we're just going to wash those tassels. We want to really draw back that red, create some really nice brown depths to it. While I'm doing this, I also grab some Nuln Oil and just quickly put some of that over the grenades just to create some shadow in the texture of the grenade itself. One of the eye sockets has a bionic eye, so when I did the red, I also base coated that, and now I've just created a bit of a pinkish hue that I'm just putting sort of in the top corner of that to give it a bit of a lens look. With our model nearing completion, it's now a good time to turn our focus to the base of the model. So I've got some texture and that on there already before I undercoated the model. And I'm just going to come in with 3 really good coats of Talon sand. We want this to be super even. So 3 really good even coats of Talon sand applied here. So here I've set up a wash of Carrienberg Crimson, and we're just going to wash practically that whole eye socket section of that hood. So we're going to make sure we get it onto those skin areas as well as onto those white eyeballs. I started out with 1 coat, thought it needed to be a little bit stronger, so I went back in when it was dry and gave it a second just to really emphasize this effect. Grab yourself some Evil Sun Scarlet now, and we're going to do what's called wet brushing. So it's very, very similar to dry brushing, but you don't take as much paint off your brush. The other thing I've done here, instead of going across the grain of these tassels, I've actually followed the grain down with the edge of my brush, more like a edge highlight. So let's grab some Lauren Forest and we'll actually layer up our grenades now. One thing to note here, once we've done our Lauren Forest, I'm not actually going to take it any further with the highlights on these grenades. They're such a small area. We've already emphasized what they are and what they look like. We don't necessarily need to highlight them, and we can probably skip taking these any higher. So I've now set up one of my favorite sort of weathering washes, and that is Scrag Brown. So I've taken roughly 1 part Scrag Brown to 7 parts water to create this wash, and I'm just going to recess wash it into the metal areas or the steel areas. This will create a really nice depth, as well as giving the imitation of a bit of dirt and grime build up, maybe a bit of light rust in the recesses there. So go ahead and do that on your steel areas, and I tell you now, it really changes the look of that steel when it's dry. Now this is a lot of fun here. I've actually grabbed 2 separate washes. I've grabbed Reichland Flesh Shade and I've grabbed Seraphim Sepia, and I've set both of these up, and we're actually going to wash this base in both those colours at the same time. This will create a really cool blend of the colours, especially where they meet, and really create a natural look to our desert base. So go ahead and do that now. If they mix together on the brush, it's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. It's just going to enhance the effect a lot more. So grab some Wraithbone here and set it up as a dry brush. And what we're going to do, we're going to dry brush over that base. We want to just pick up more of the subtle highlight areas. If you find it a bit thick in some spots, or you get it on your model where you don't want it, that's okay. You can just wipe it off, get a moist or damp cloth, use your finger, just touch it to your tongue and just wipe it off. And just like I said, just pick this up. This is where the desert effect really starts coming to life now. So give it a light dry brush, work it up a little bit more at a time, We don't want to go too heavy because you can't take this back, but you can always add to it if it's too light. So we're going to grab just a touch of white scar now as well, and we're going to do the same thing. We're not washing out our dry brush at all here. We just want a touch of it very lightly just to pick up those super raised details. We really just have our hooves left. So we'll grab some Xandri dust and just very, very carefully go over those hoof areas just with 1 coat. This doesn't have to be perfectly even. If this part's not even, it actually lends to the effect better. grab some Agrax Earthshade and we'll just shade those hooves now. We just want to make sure that that shade goes right down to the base as well, just to create sort of a dark shadow line around the base of the hoof. With that done, we're actually finished. But there's just one final step to do, and that is to paint the rim of the base in a colour of your choice. In my case, as you'll see in the next frames, I've gone with a black rim just to keep it simple. I've added a couple of dry grass tufts on there as well, just to create a bit more interest. So there you go, guys. You can use this scheme for your Fellgor's Ravagers. You can use it for your Beastmen for the old world, or your Brayherds for Age of Sigmar. So this video is ideal for 3 groups of people there. The other thing is, using the skin tones that we've used, you could essentially use it on any model that you wanted to look old. It could work for vampires. It could work for even Escher that have maybe been super chem enhanced. Or on a lot of combat drugs and that sort of stuff. Dark Elder, there's another one. So you start thinking about these things, and you can actually translate this across to a lot of other armies, gangs out there. The other good thing about it being so monochromatic, the skin, a lot of the parchment looks, a lot of the wraps looking the same. It's fairly simple to do, but then it also has that pop of the green and the red, especially the red, really lifts this model back up. The desert base also is a nice frame. It still lends into the tones that are already on the model, but it provides just enough of a frame and a lift to make the model stand out at the same time. So that's one key thing when you think of doing your models. Think about your bases. Before you apply your first layers of paint, you need to think, what's the end result I want in my bases? Finally, I know that with my Ravagers themselves, I'm going to be lending more into the browns, so a brown leather wouldn't work. So I had to draw from real life inspiration. And this came in the sense of a sand brown belt from the Australian Army dress uniform. It's used by officers. It's usually the belt that attaches the sheath for a sword. But it's very red. It's not actually brown. It's a very strong red brown. And this has provided great inspiration for a different tone of brown that I could use here. So no matter what browns I use on my models, I can still use this belt and actually get away with it and have it stand out. And this all comes back to the planning step. You've got to plan your model out from the start and plan what you want it to look like. Have your idea in your head. Play around with some colors, even if you've just got to get them out and mix them up on the palette, so you get an idea of how these colors are going to work together. But that's it for this one, guys. Stay tuned. Next week we're going to have another awesome video. Jump down onto our socials, especially on our Instagram and on our Facebook as well. And we're going to preview what our next video is going to be on those socials from here on in. So if you want early access to know what projects we're going through and what we're working on and going to be releasing for you guys, you need to get on those socials, guys. Apart from that, if you like and subscribe, that's the first step. The second step, jump on our socials. If you guys have any questions that you need answered, feel free to drop them in the comments below. We'll answer your questions. We'll give you guys tips. We'll be able to do short videos on specific colors, specific finishes, even specific models. If we're able to do those models, if we've got them ready, we're able to access them, cool, we can get them out, we can paint them for you. That way it helps you guys out. And at the end of the day, if you guys are painting your models and getting them finished, you're winning. But if you guys are painting them to a high standard like this, I'm winning, because I know that what I'm doing is working for you guys. Till next week, guys, have a great week. Stay safe out there, especially if you're in Australia. It's going to be a hot one. Have a good one.